Gentlemen, I landed at Samsun on the 19th May 1919. This was the position at that time. The group of powers, which included the Ottoman government, had been defeated in the Great War. The Ottoman army had been crushed on every front. An armistice had been signed under severe conditions. The prolongation of the Great War had left the people exhausted and impoverished. Those who had driven the people and the country into the World War had fled and now cared for nothing but their own safety. Vahdettin, the degenerate occupant of the throne and the caliphate, was seeking for some despicable way to save his person and his throne, the only objects of his anxiety. The cabinet, of which Damat Ferit Pasha was the head, was weak and lacked dignity and courage. It was subservient to the will of the Sultan alone and agreed to every proposal that could protect its members and their sovereign. The army had been deprived of their arms and ammunition, and its state of affairs continued. The Entente powers did not consider it necessary to respect the terms of the armistice. On various pretexts, their men of war and troops remained at Istanbul. The province of Adana was occupied by the French, Urfa, Maraş, Antep by the English. In Antalya and Konya were the Italians, while at the Merzifon and Samsun were English troops. Foreign officers and officials and their special agents were very active in everywhere. At last, on the 15th May, that is to say, 4 days before the following account of events begins, the Greek army, with the consent of the Entente powers, had landed at Izmir. Christian elements were also at work all over the country, either openly or in secret, trying to realize their own particular ambitions and thereby hasten the breakdown of the state. Certain information and authentic documents that fell into our hands later on prove that the Greek organization Mavrimira, established by the Patriarchate in Istanbul, was forming bands, organizing meetings, and making propaganda in the provinces. The Greek Red Cross and the Official Immigrants Commission supported the work of the Mavrimira. The formation of Boy Scouts in the Greek schools directed by the Mavrimira were reinforced by the admission even of young men over 20 years of age. The Armenian Patriarch Zaven Efendi also worked in connection with the Mavrimira. The preparations made by the Armenians progressed side by side with those made by the Greeks. A society called the Pontus at Trabzon, Samsun, and other places along the whole of the Black Sea coast, having their headquarters in Istanbul, worked openly and successfully. On account of the appalling seriousness of the situation, which was apparent everywhere, particularly in all the provinces, certain prominent personalities had begun to develop countermeasures to improve the situation. This resulted in new organizations being started. Thus, for instance, there were unions or societies at Edirne and surrounding districts called Trakya Paşaeli. In the east, at Erzurum and Elazığ, the Union of Defense of the National Rights of the Eastern Provinces had been formed, also with their headquarters in Istanbul. Again, in Trabzon, there was a society called the Defense of Rights, and in Istanbul, a league for the separation of Trabzon and its district. Through the exertions of the members of this league, subcommittees had been established at Of and in the district of the Rize. Some of the young patriots at Izmir, who since the 13th May had noticed distinct indication of the approaching occupation of the town, had held meetings about the distressing condition of affairs during the night of the 14th, and in principle had agreed to oppose the occupation by the Greeks, which at that time was considered to be practically an accomplished fact, designed to end in annexation, and resisted it on the principle of no annexation. During the same night, those of the inhabitants who were able to meet at the Jewish cemetery at Izmir drew up a protest and spread it broadcast. But as the Greek troops actually landed on the following morning, this attempt failed to achieve the desired result. I would like to give you a short account of the object and political aims of these organizations. I had already had a conversation in Istanbul with some of the leaders of the Trakya Paşaeli Society. They considered that the breakdown of the Ottoman Empire was extremely probable. In face of the threatened danger of the dismemberment of their country, their first thought was to save eastern Trakya and later on, if possible, to form a Turco-Mohammedan community that would include western Trakya. The only way by which they thought they could realize this aim was to put their trust in England, or if this was not possible, in France. With this object, they tried to get into touch with certain political personalities belonging to foreign countries. It was believed that their intention was to establish a Trakya Republic. The object of the defense of the national rights of the Eastern Provinces Union, on the other hand, was to use all lawful means to ensure the free exercise and development of their religious and political rights for all elements inhabiting these provinces, to defend, if it should become necessary, the historical and national rights of the Mohammedan population of these provinces, to institute an impartial inquiry for the purpose of discovering the motives, the instigators and agitators implicated in the extortions and cruelties committed in the eastern provinces, so that the guilty ones might be punished without delay, to do their utmost to remove the misunderstanding that existed between the different elements in the country, and to restore the good relation that had formerly existed between them, and finally to appeal to the government to elevate as far as it lay in their power the misery resulting from the war. Acting on these principles that emanated from the Central Committee in Istanbul, the Erzurum branch decided to undertake, in defense of the rights of the Turks, to inform the civilized world by means of convincing documents that, since the deportation, that people had been taking no part whatever in the excesses. Further, that the property of Armenians had been protected up to the time when the country was invaded by the Russians. On the other hand, that the Mohammedans had been compelled to suffer from the cruelest acts of violence, and that some Armenians who had been saved from deportation had, in disobedience of orders, attacked their own protectors. The branch were doing their very best to resist any attempt to annex the eastern provinces. The members of the Erzurum branch of the defense of the national rights of the eastern provinces resolved, as stated in their printed report, after having studied the propaganda circulated in these provinces as well the Turkish, Kurdish and Armenian questions, from the scientific and historical point of view, to concentrate their further efforts on the following points. First, on no account to emigrate. Second, forthwith to form scientific, economic and religious organizations. Third, to unite in the defense of even the smallest part of the eastern provinces that might be attacked. it can be seen that the headquarters of the defense of the national rights of the eastern provinces were far too optimistic in their expectation to succeed through civil and scientific means. They continued to exert themselves indefatigably in this direction, for the purpose of defending the rights. If Mohammedans dwelling in the eastern provinces, they published a French journal, which they called Le Poise. They acquired the right to publish a magazine called Hadisat. They also presented memorials to the representatives of the Entente powers in Istanbul and tried to send a delegation to Europe. From the foregoing statements, it appears to me to be clearly evident that the possible cession of the eastern provinces to Armenia was the most important reason for this society having been formed. They anticipated that this possibility might become a reality if those who tried to prove that the Armenians were in the majority in these provinces, claiming the oldest historical rights, were to succeed in misleading the public opinion of the world by alleged scientific and historic documents, and by perpetuating the calumny that the Mohammedan population was composed of savages whose chief occupation was the massacre the Armenians. Consequently, the society aimed at the defense of the national and historic rights by corresponding methods and arguments. The fear also existed that a Greek Pontic state might be founded on the shores of the Black Sea. At Trabzon, several persons had formed another society with the object of protecting the rights of the Mohammedan population, to safeguard their existence and prevent them from falling under the yoke of the Greeks. Their political aim and program is already sufficiently obvious from its name, the Society for the Cession of the Territory of Trabzon, whose head office was in Istanbul. In any case, they set out with the idea of separating this district from the central government. Besides this organization, which were being formed in the manner I have described, other societies and enterprises began to make their preference. In the provinces of Diyarbakır, Bitlis and Elazığ, among others, there was a league for the resuscitation of the Kurds, with its head offices also in Istanbul. Their aim was to erect the Kurdish state under foreign protection. Work was going on at Konya and surrounding districts for the formation of the league, having for its object the revival of Islam, also with its offices in Istanbul. There were organizations named Unity and Freedom, and it peace and salvation throughout almost the whole of the country. In Istanbul, there were numerous public and secret organizations calling themselves parties or societies and pursuing various aims. One of the most important of these, the Society of the Friends of England, is worthy of special mention. It does not follow from its name that its members were necessarily friends of England. In my opinion, the founders of this society were people who thought before anything else of their own safety and their own particular interests, and who tried to secure both by inducing Lloyd George's government to afford them English protection. I wonder whether these misguided persons really imagined for a moment that the English government had any idea at all of maintaining and preserving the Ottoman state in its integrity.